Hello from Mindset Daily, wishing you a day full of health, peace, and happiness. Thank you for watching the Mindset Daily channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support us. Thank you so much. Why would a loving God allow the people you trusted most to break you? What if your heartbreak wasn't a setback, but a setup for something greater? Could the very pain you're trying to escape be the path toward your purpose? Some of you have been crying out to God, asking, why did you let them do this to me? You were faithful. You prayed. You gave your heart without holding back. You loved them purely, sincerely. And yet, they betrayed you. They walked away when you needed them most. They left you wounded, trying to gather the pieces of a heart they didn't bother to stay and fix. In moments like these, it's natural to wonder, where was God while it all fell apart? But what if I told you God wanted them to hurt you? Not because he took pleasure in your suffering, not because you deserved it, but because that very pain was designed to move you, to shift you, to awaken you to something greater. That betrayal wasn't just an attack, it was an assignment. That rejection wasn't meant to break you, it was meant to realign you. Because if they hadn't hurt you, you might still be holding on to the wrong place, the wrong people, or even the wrong version of your life. You see, sometimes it takes the sting of a wound to wake us up to our worth. Sometimes God uses heartbreak to remove us from what was never meant to hold us. I'm here to remind you tonight, your pain was never random. Your tears were not wasted. By the end of this message, you will begin to see your scars not as signs of failure, but as evidence of destiny unfolding. So stay with me, because this truth, uncomfortable as it may be, is about to set something free inside of you. Let's go deeper, because what comes next may change how you see your pain forever. We just talked about how pain isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's positioning. But to truly grasp that truth, let's look at a story that reveals how pain can pave the path to purpose. Take Joseph, for example. His own brothers, his blood, sold him into slavery. The very people who were meant to protect him, love him, stand beside him, turned on him. They threw him into a pit and walked away, leaving him broken and alone. Can you imagine the pain of hearing their laughter echoing above as he cried out for mercy? Now picture this, a young man, ripped from his home, dragged into a foreign land, treated like property, and stripped of all dignity. The silence, the confusion, the overwhelming loneliness. How must that have felt? And yet, years later, Joseph stood tall as the second most powerful man in all of Egypt. When those same brothers came before him, desperate, starving, at the mercy of the one they betrayed, he didn't seek revenge. He didn't curse them. He looked at them and said words that still echo through time. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Some of you know that kind of betrayal. You've been wounded so deeply, it shook the very ground of your faith. You've cried yourself to sleep, whispering, God, did you see what they did to me? You've asked again and again, how could a loving God allow this? But maybe you're asking the wrong question. Instead of asking why God allowed it, maybe the better question is, what is God trying to do through it? Because if Joseph's brothers had never betrayed him, he never would have ended up in Egypt. If he had never been thrown into that pit, he never would have stood in the palace. The betrayal wasn't a detour. It was the exact road he had to take. And some of you, right now, are still in your pit. You're weeping over what they did, believing you've been buried. But what if you've actually been planted? God is not in the business of making your life easy. He's in the business of making you strong. And strength isn't forged in comfort. It's built in the pressing, the suffering, the silent nights when you feel like there's nothing left inside you to give. Let's keep going, because the next part will show you how even your weakest moment can become the beginning of your greatest breakthrough. We just saw how God doesn't build strength in comfort, but in the crushing, in the pressing, in the pit. And now, let's talk about what that strength really looks like in your life. You don't develop faith when everything is going your way. Faith is born in chaos, in the seasons when everything seems to be falling apart, and yet you still choose to trust Him. That kind of faith isn't cheap. It's forged in the fire. Some of you wouldn't pray the way you do now if they hadn't walked away. You wouldn't have fallen to your knees with that level of desperation if they hadn't betrayed you. You wouldn't have looked in the mirror and finally seen your worth if they hadn't rejected you first. If they had stayed, you would have stayed small. If they had been loyal, you would have never leaned into God with such intensity. Isn't it strange how loss can become the very thing that leads you to life? The truth is, sometimes God allows people to hurt you because He knows you're too attached to let go on your own. He sees what you're not ready to release. Some of you would have never left that relationship if it weren't for betrayal. You would have never walked away from that job if they hadn't pushed you out. And you would have never discovered your true purpose if they hadn't made you feel like you didn't belong. So yes, God let them break you, not to destroy you, but because He knew the pain would wake you up. I know it didn't feel like grace at the time. It felt cruel. It felt like abandonment. Like God turned His back when you needed Him most. But let me tell you something. The very thing that brought you to tears will become the very thing that strengthens you. That feeling of being cast aside, it's what will set you apart. That pain that nearly destroyed you, it will be the door that leads to your destiny. And if you need a reminder that even the chosen suffer, just look at Jesus, the Son of God. He walked among us, healing the sick, raising the dead, loving the outcasts. And yet, what did people do? They mocked Him. They rejected Him. They tortured Him. They crucified Him. The very ones He came to save turned against Him. And yet, we'll pick up from here next, because what happens after the rejection will change how you see your own. We just reflected on how even Jesus, the Son of God, was rejected and betrayed by those He came to save. But here's the deeper truth. That moment of suffering wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something divine. At the very moment when it looked like evil had triumphed, when pain had reached its peak, God was unfolding His greatest plan. Without the betrayal, there would have been no cross. Without the cross, there would have been no resurrection. And without the resurrection, there would be no salvation. The hurt wasn't a mistake, it was necessary. The suffering wasn't random, it was part of the process. God didn't send Jesus into the world to live a life of ease. He sent Him to fulfill a purpose. And in the same way, He didn't place you here to coast through comfort. He placed you here to rise into something greater. And sometimes, to get you there, He has to let you walk through fire. But that fire isn't designed to consume you. It's meant to refine you. The betrayal you experienced, it wasn't meant to break you. It was meant to build you. The rejection, it wasn't sent to ruin you. It was designed to release you into the very thing God prepared for you. So instead of resenting the people who hurt you, maybe it's time to start thanking God for the lesson that came from the pain. Instead of replaying the betrayal over and over in your mind, try focusing on the blessing it's pushing you toward. Because here's the truth. If they had the power to destroy you, you wouldn't be here right now. The fact that you're still standing is proof God isn't done with you yet. You may not fully understand it now. It might still hurt, but one day you'll look back, and when you do, you'll see that every tear, every heartbreak, every lonely night was leading you somewhere far greater than you could have imagined. One day, you'll stand in your own place of redemption, just like Joseph did, and say, they meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And on that day, you won't even feel anger anymore. The bitterness will fade, because you'll realize if they hadn't hurt you, you wouldn't have become who you are today. And now let's look at how everything that tried to break you might actually be the very thing God uses to bless you. In the last part, we saw how every heartbreak, every betrayal was shaping you, not to harm you, but to prepare you for something greater. Now let's take that truth even deeper. Because if God had to break your heart to save your soul, then that pain, no matter how sharp, was worth it. Some of the deepest wounds in your life weren't random. They weren't just accidents, coincidences, or bad luck. They were part of something far greater than what you could see in the moment. Something divine, something eternal. I know it doesn't feel like that when you're right in the middle of the hurt. It rarely makes sense when you're lying awake at night, tears soaking the pillow, wondering how the people who were supposed to love you the most could be the ones who left you broken. But what if I told you there was a purpose behind the pain? What if everything you went through, the betrayal, the rejection, the nights you felt completely alone, was not wasted? You see, we often have this idea that once we give our lives to God, everything should start falling into place. We think that because we love Him, because we pray, because we try to live righteously, life should be fair and pain-free. But nowhere in Scripture does God promise a life without suffering. In fact, He tells us quite the opposite. He says, "In this world you will have trouble." But then He adds, "Take heart, for I have overcome the world." He never promised you wouldn't cry. He never promised people wouldn't hurt you. He never said you wouldn't face seasons where everything feels like it's falling apart. But what He did promise is that there is purpose in every trial. There's meaning behind every hardship. There's something sacred in every tear you've shed. Look at Job, a man who was upright, faithful, and feared God. He lived with integrity. And yet, in the blink of an eye, he lost nearly everything. His children, his wealth, his health. His closest friends came and told him he must have done something wrong. Even his own wife told him to give up, to curse God and die. But Job? And it's here where we'll continue, because what Job did next reveals something powerful about how faith can survive even in the darkest storms. We just looked at Job, a man who lost everything yet remained faithful. And now we're about to uncover why his story still speaks so powerfully to ours today. Job didn't realize that his suffering wasn't a form of punishment. It was preparation. What he couldn't see in the middle of the storm was that God had a greater plan already in motion. Even as Job sat in silence and grief, God remained in control. And in the end, God restored everything Job had lost, blessing him with even more than he had before. Some of you are in that same season right now, a job season. You're looking at your life and wondering how it all unraveled so quickly. The things you worked so hard to build feel like they're slipping through your fingers. People you thought would stay have walked away. And as the betrayals, the disappointments, and the setbacks stack up, you find yourself asking, God, why? But what if you knew that this season of suffering is actually a setup for something far greater? What if the delay, the confusion, the heartbreak, it's not about punishment at all, but positioning? Look at David. He was anointed to be king, but he didn't ascend the throne right away. No, his path led straight into the wilderness. He spent years running for his life, hiding in caves, wondering when God's promise would finally come to pass. Along the way, he faced betrayal, rejection, and constant hardship. But each battle prepared him for leadership. Each heartbreak taught him how to depend on God. Every single setback served as a setup for the moment he would finally step into the promise that had been spoken over his life. Some of you are asking why God hasn't elevated you yet, why you're still struggling, why the breakthroughs you've been praying for seem just out of reach. But here's the truth. God will not lead you into a destiny you are not prepared to handle. And preparation, real preparation, often comes through pain. Because pain teaches you how to pray with sincerity. Pain reveals who's truly for you and who's not. Pain strips away pride and builds spiritual strength. And now, let's look at how that same pain, the one you've been trying to escape, might be the very thing God is using to shape your destiny. In the last part, we saw how pain prepares you, how it teaches you to pray, to discern, and to grow. But there's one more lesson pain brings, the ability to depend fully on God, not on people. Because pain teaches you to lean on the one who will never leave you. Until you learn that lesson, you won't be ready for what's coming next. You may think that the people who walked away were just part of a difficult chapter, just another painful scene in your story. But what if their rejection wasn't random? What if their absence was actually God's protection? What if those who hurt you were removed so you wouldn't settle where you were never meant to stay? Some of you would have never taken a step forward if the pain hadn't pushed you. Some of you would have never gone deeper in prayer, never drawn closer to God, if everything in your life had been easy. And some of you would have never become the person you are now if life hadn't forced you to stand on your own. Even Jesus, the Son of God, had to endure rejection, betrayal, and agony in order to fulfill his purpose. The very ones he loved turned their backs on him. The very people he came to save abandoned him when he needed them most. And yet, as he hung on the cross, beaten, bloodied, and alone, he knew that the pain had a purpose. Because without the suffering, there would be no salvation. Without the crucifixion, there would be no resurrection. Without the pain, the promise could never be fulfilled. Some of you are still carrying pain that you don't fully understand. You're holding on to wounds that haven't healed, and you're wondering if anything good could possibly come from what they did to you. But hear this. One day, you'll look back and see it clearly. The very thing that hurt you the most will turn out to be the thing that pushed you straight into your purpose. The suffering was necessary, because without it, you wouldn't be the person you are today. And if God had to let you walk through that fire, then let's talk about what he's preparing you for on the other side. We just talked about how pain can be the very thing that pushes you into purpose. Now let's take that one step further. If God had to use pain to get you to the promise, then every tear, every trial, it was worth it. There are moments in life when the weight of it all feels unbearable. You find yourself asking God, why is this happening to me? You feel the sting of betrayal, the ache of rejection, the emptiness that comes with loss. And you wonder, will I ever truly recover from this? In these moments, we face a defining choice. Will we let the pain destroy us, or will we let it develop us? Will it make us bitter, or will it make us stronger? Because whether we see it in the moment or not, every heartbreak, every hardship, every disappointment is shaping us into the person God has called us to become. Growth is happening, even in the shadows. God never promised that life would be easy. He never said that following him would shield us from storms. In fact, he made it clear, in this world, you will have trouble. Not you might. Not some people will. He said, you will have trouble. That means suffering is part of the journey. Pain isn't something we can escape. It's something we must walk through. But he didn't leave us in despair. He followed that promise with hope. But take heart. I have overcome the world. He was reminding us that even when trouble comes, even when the path is rough, he's still in control. And nothing we face can intimidate the God who already holds victory in his hands. Just look at the lives of those God used powerfully throughout Scripture. Every single one of them walked through pain before stepping into purpose. Joseph had to be betrayed before he could be promoted. David had to fight battles before he could wear the crown. Moses had to wander the wilderness before he could lead God's people to the promised land. And even Jesus, he had to endure the cross before he could rise in victory. So what does that tell us? That pain isn't just something to endure. It's part of the divine preparation. And in the next part, we'll look at how your pain, no matter how deep, might be preparing you for something far greater than you ever imagined. In the last part, we saw how every person God used powerfully first had to walk through pain. And now, we begin to understand why that pain is not accidental. It's part of the process. Pain isn't just an unfortunate part of life. It's part of God's training ground. It's how he molds, prepares, and strengthens those he intends to use. Because the truth is, God cannot use someone who hasn't been tested. He cannot elevate someone who hasn't endured the fire. He cannot take you to a higher place if your faith remains shallow. That's why he allows the trials, not to destroy you, but to develop you, not to crush your spirit, but to refine your soul. Because there are lessons you simply cannot learn in comfort. There's a depth of faith that only suffering can reach. Faith isn't built when everything is going right. It's built when everything seems to be falling apart, and you still choose to believe. Faith is built when you're holding on by a thread, and that thread is God. Faith is built when the tears won't stop, and yet you keep praying anyway. Some of you have walked through seasons where it felt like everything was being stripped away. You lost people you cared about. You lost opportunities you thought were yours. You lost things you once believed you couldn't live without. But hear this. If God allowed it to be removed from your life, it's because you didn't need it for where He's taking you. He's always working, even when you can't see it. But the way He works, it often defies human logic. We ask God for strength and expect Him to place it gently in our hands. But strength isn't handed out, it's built. And how is strength built? Through resistance, through pressure, through the hard things we would never choose for ourselves. That's why God sometimes allows opposition, not to defeat you, but to develop spiritual resilience. That's why He may let people hurt you, not to break you down, but to build something up inside of you. Some of you wouldn't have the kind of faith you do today if you hadn't walked through that valley. Some of you wouldn't be standing this strong if you hadn't survived what you thought would destroy you. And in the next part, we'll explore how every piece of pain you've endured is equipping you for the promise that's still ahead. We just reflected on how pain can be the tool God uses to build strength in us. Now let's look at how that same pain can lead you to purpose by first leading you through loss. Some of you wouldn't have discovered your true calling if you hadn't experienced rejection. You would have never known how to stand on your own if certain people hadn't walked away. Sometimes, God has to allow people to leave, not to punish you, but to teach you how to fully lean on Him. Sometimes He allows everything to fall apart just so you'll realize He's the only foundation that never will. And yes, it hurts. It's confusing. There are nights when you lie awake wondering if the pain they caused will ever fade. But let me tell you something with certainty. God does not waste pain. If He allowed it, He intends to use it. If He took something or someone away, it's because He's preparing to replace it with something far greater. If He let you walk through the fire, it's because that fire has a purpose. To refine you. Think about gold. When it's first discovered, it's far from pure. It's mixed with things that don't belong, impurities that lower its value. And the only way to make gold valuable is to put it through fire. That fire burns away what doesn't serve its purpose. It removes everything that holds it back from reaching its highest potential. Some of you are in that fire right now. You're in a season where it feels like everything around you is burning down. But what if that fire isn't meant to destroy you? What if it's meant to purify you? To remove the attitudes, relationships, and distractions that can't go with you into the next season of your life? I know it's hard to see clearly when you're in the middle of the heat. I know it's hard to keep trusting when the pain still lingers. But hear this. This is not the end of your story. It's just a chapter before the breakthrough. If you don't give up, if you keep trusting, if you keep walking, even when the road doesn't make sense, there will come a day when you look back and realize every tear, every trial, every silent, aching night, all of it was leading you somewhere. And in the next part, we'll begin to see how God takes the broken pieces and turns them into the foundation of your greatest transformation. We just talked about how the fire you're walking through isn't meant to destroy you. It's meant to prepare you. And now, let's look at what happens when you finally reach the other side. One day, you'll stand in the very place God has been preparing for you all along. And when you do, you'll look back, not in bitterness, but with clarity. You'll say, it was all worth it. Because if the pain made you stronger, if the suffering brought you closer to God, if the struggle positioned you perfectly for your purpose, then the fire wasn't just part of the process, it was necessary. And if God had to take you through that fire to get you to the life you were meant to live, then every part of it was woven into his perfect plan. But there comes a time, a turning point, when you have to stop looking back. You have to stop replaying the betrayal in your mind. Stop trying to analyze every word, every action, every silence that left you wounded. Stop holding on to pain as if keeping it will finally make it make sense. Because the truth is, some things won't make sense. Some people will never apologize. And if you spend your life waiting for closure, waiting for the people who hurt you to return and make things right, you may never step into what God has already prepared ahead of you. We sometimes believe that holding on to pain gives us control. That if we keep revisiting the moment, if we keep replaying the conversations, we'll somehow uncover justice or find healing on our terms. But in reality, the more tightly you hold onto what they did, the more power you give them over your present and your future. Let me remind you, God didn't bring you this far to keep you stuck in your past. He didn't carry you through the pain just so you could remain bound by it. What they did may have hurt you, but it does not have to define you. And here's the key. Forgiveness isn't about saying what they did was okay. It's not about minimizing the betrayal, pretending it didn't break you, or acting like the rejection didn't leave a scar. In the next part, we'll talk about what forgiveness really is and how choosing it may be the one decision that finally sets you free. Previously, we talked about how what they did may have wounded you, but it doesn't have to define you. Now, let's talk about the one thing that truly sets you free: forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's not about pretending you weren't hurt or pretending the scars don't still ache. No. Forgiveness is about freedom. It's about refusing to let the pain of your past poison the potential of your future. It's choosing, no matter how deeply they wounded you, that their actions will not control your destiny. Forgiveness is saying, you may have tried to break me, but I will not stay broken. Some of you have been carrying burdens God never asked you to carry. You've been holding on to anger, to bitterness, to resentment, waiting for a day when you'll finally feel justified, vindicated, free. But let me tell you the truth. Revenge is not your responsibility. Justice is not your burden to carry. That job belongs to God alone, and He's already made it clear. Vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. That means you don't have to exhaust your heart trying to get even. You don't have to spend sleepless nights replaying what they did, thinking of ways to make them feel what you felt. That's not your assignment. Your only task: to let go, to trust that God saw what they did, to believe that He understands the depth of your pain, and that in His perfect timing, He will take care of it far better than you ever could. Some of you have been waiting for an apology that may never come. You've been stuck, holding out hope that they'll admit their wrongdoing. But hear this. If you keep waiting for them to acknowledge the pain they caused, you may stay trapped in a prison of your own making. Because freedom isn't found in their apology. Freedom begins the moment you choose to release them. It's when you say, I won't let this chain me to my past. I won't let this keep me from stepping into who I'm becoming. Because as long as you hold on to the hurt, you'll block the healing. As long as you keep looking back, you won't be able to walk forward. Just look at Joseph. He had every reason to hold a grudge. His own brothers, his family, threw him into a pit and sold him into slavery. And in the next part, we'll see how Joseph's response to betrayal reveals what true forgiveness and breakthrough really looks like. Previously, we explored how forgiveness is not about excusing the pain. It's about releasing yourself from it. And now, Joseph's story takes that truth even deeper. His own brothers betrayed him. They sold him into slavery, abandoned him, and left him for dead. Joseph had every right to be angry. He could have spent years consumed with bitterness, replaying every moment of betrayal. waiting for the day he'd get the chance to make them suffer like he did. But he didn't. When God elevated Joseph, when the tables turned and those same brothers stood before him in desperation, he didn't use his power for revenge. He didn't punish them. Instead, he forgave them. And then he said something that would echo through generations. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. That's the kind of perspective that transforms your life. When you understand that no matter how much they try to hurt you, God is still in control, everything shifts. What they meant for harm, God can use for your healing. The rejection, the betrayal, the pain, it may have shaken you, but it didn't stop the plan of God. Some of you have been so focused on the pain that you haven't even seen how far you've come. You've been so consumed with the injustice, the heartbreak, the bitterness of what happened, that you've overlooked the growth happening within you. You're not who you used to be. The thing that was supposed to break you, it made you stronger. The betrayal that should have destroyed you, it propelled you toward your purpose. The rejection that hurt so deeply, it was actually God's way of redirecting you to something far greater than you imagined. But here's the truth. You can't move forward while dragging the weight of your past behind you. You can't step into your calling while still chained to what they did. At some point, you have to decide, will I stay bitter or will I get better? Will I keep holding on to the pain or will I trust that God has something greater ahead? And yes, I know it's not easy, but in the next part, we'll talk about why healing isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to believe that what's ahead is greater than what's behind. In the last part, we reflected on how freedom begins when you release the past and trust that what lies ahead is far greater than what you left behind. But how do you let go when the pain is still so fresh? It's not easy to move on when the wounds still ache, when the memories of